When the storm will stop and the noise goes down, the lights go up in the middle of town. When the streets are gone and there's no...
Hey friends,
I'm JB,
and I'm Sarah.
and this is the Go Podcast.
When the storm will stop and the noise goes down, the lights...
What's up, guys? It's JB here. I am by myself today, but we have an awesome interview for you guys. Sarah and I were able to chat with one of our former students. Her name is Miriam Schweyer, and she is just an incredible person. It was so cool to sit down and just kind of talk to her about what's going on in her life, what God's teaching her. We dive into the book of Job a little bit. We talk about the wisdom of God. It was just a really cool opportunity for us to get to reconnect with a student of ours from Indiana. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. We were really blessed to have Miriam on the show. I think it's only our second guest. So take a listen. Hope you enjoy it. Maybe you can even take some notes. Miriam drops some pretty legit wisdom on us. So without further ado, here is our conversation with Miriam Schweyer.
So I am thrilled about this evening because one of my favorite humans is on the podcast tonight. This is Miriam. Miriam, can you say hi?
What's up, Miriam?
Jonathan, there you go. Jonathan and I are excited to talk with you because you're one of our favorites.
I know.
Favorites of all time.
I know.
She's like, I know you say that to everyone.
That's okay, because some make me feel special.
Yeah. So kind of what's awesome is Miriam was one of our middle school students in Fort Wayne. We were thrilled to have her. She was teeny tiny when we met her, right? You were like 3 feet
Just
tall.
a little.
And so now Miriam is an adult, a college student, and it's just really cool when students turn into friends. So Miriam, tell us a little bit about the school that you're at right now.
Right, so it's a school of discipleship. It's based at Miracle Mountain Ranch, which is it's a mix of a retreat center. They've got summer camps. They do messages, go out and teach. Their big thing that they do is disciple and build disciples. So this year is based around getting us into the Bible, teaching us how to study it and how to build messages, and then sending us out to disciple. The application processes during the summer when we work the summer camp, and they let us practice what all we've been learning and apply it.
Okay. And it's a 1-year program, is that correct?
Yes, it's a 1 year, and then if they have room for a second year after they get new first years, then they can invite you back. But,
Okay.
yeah.
How did your family hear about this camp?
So
School.
my mom heard about it. She knew someone who was up here working, and they needed nurses, and 7 years ago, I believe. And so she came up as a nurse, and I started as a rancher, which is just on the campus during the summer.
Okay.
And then once I was able to, I started volunteering and then came on summer staff. So it's been like 7 years now, and just been up here for summers, and really good, love the place.
Yeah.
You've,
I remember.
you've worked there. I was going to say, you've worked there almost every summer, right? Like
Yeah.
most of the summer.
Yes.
That was what I was going to say. I remember pouting when you'd be gone for the whole summer. And I'm like, please come back. Like,
Well, I made it back for missions trips.
That's
yes,
true.
you did.
You
Those
can't
were-
miss mission trips.
Yeah, no, can't. That'd be wrong.
Yeah. So this camp has been, and this school has been really important in your life.
Yeah. It's like a second home. And it's a really great place because you're constantly surrounded by people who are in love with God. Like at home, you get that at your house or at your church and sometimes at your job, but it's not a normal thing for you to constantly be surrounded by the same people who are always in God's word and striving to live a life for Christ. And so it's really encouraging, and it pushes me to want that more.
Mm-hmm.
And you always have someone. I always have someone right next to me that I can talk to. Like, hey, this is what I'm learning. This is what I'm struggling with. Can get input on that. What do you think about this?
So
Yeah.
how many people are at this camp or at this school with you?
There are 31 of us students, but I believe there's around 30 staff members. So they're here full time all year round. They live off of support income, and they
Wow.
all do different things. There's people who work in the barns with the horses. That's a big part of their ministry. They use their horses as a way to present the gospel.
Don't they do
So-
like horse tricks too?
Yeah, so one of the things they offer in the summer for the kids is vaulting, which is like gymnastics on a horse. You can stand on a horse while it's walking, or hang off the side of it, do a back bend on it, which is super cool.
I remember when you come home and talk about it and be like, wait, what? Like, explain this, like, what, vaulting on a horse, and loved it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. That was actually, they're required to get a PE course. So that was our PE course at the beginning of the year. So we had to go through vaulting, and then we had a test at the end.
I'm
showing
gonna
off some of the
need a
things we did.
video.
I've got one. We actually had to pick a theme for our routine and put it to music. So we picked Bambi.
Okay.
So I was dressed up like a bunny and hopping around everywhere, and it was really great.
I love it. Yes, please send that to me.
I will definitely do that.
I can post it everywhere.
Yes. No.
That's super cool. So tonight we're excited. Miriam has some homework, and we're going to help her out with that. So she got an assignment that she needed to talk to some people. Is that correct?
Yeah, we talked to 2 people about it.
And she picked us. We're so special. Jonathan, don't you think we're special?
I think we're super special. Sorry, I was paused because I was getting some tea,
Some herbal tea.
some herbal tea.
I don't know when we became old, but we did.
Dude,
I don't think tea qualifies you as old, or I'd be really old.
I think we hit full-blown millennial. We eat avocados and drink herbal tea and lots of coffee.
Yes.
Cool. Well, why don't we get to the questions? I'm excited to hear what Miriam has for us.
Yeah, so the project as a whole was focusing on Job and the wisdom of his God, and how throughout all the trials, and even though he didn't understand what was going on, and the people around him, his 3 friends, were pushing him to turn away from God because he was obviously throwing all this pain on him, he still remained faithful and trusted that God had wisdom in the whole situation. And so just looking at it in how does God work his wisdom throughout Job's situation, and where we can see that same wisdom in our own lives. But so I think one of the first questions I had for you guys was just where in your lives personally, lately, or even in past, do you know that like God was working his wisdom, or you saw that it was maybe something you didn't understand, but God obviously had something great in it?
Yeah, I think that's something we've talked about a lot in our marriage in particular. But I know, like, I think we've told the story on the podcast of when I kind of got my call to ministry, like 2 months before our wedding, and I called Sarah and I was like, "Hey, I'm not going to be a doctor now, and I'm going to go into ministry and be a youth pastor."
I'm still mad about that.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Just kidding.
But it was scary, but we knew for sure that's what God had in mind. But it's hard to see the plan of that when you're right in the moment. So now 10 years down the road, to look back and like, oh yeah, God knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me too, just looking through my journals has been really encouraging to me, because Jonathan and I are still in a season of transition from moving from Fort Wayne to coming to Georgia. And our last transition, when we moved from Muncie to Fort Wayne, was hard. And before we knew where we were going to be moving, we felt like God set on our hearts already that we were going to move. And so it felt really unsettled. And I see my journal now back like from then where I was pouring out my heart to God of like, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know where you're leading. I remember even once I was like full on yelling at God in my car. Like I had applied for a job and interviewed and it didn't work out. And I was like, God, like, what? Where are you sending us? What are you doing? And then Jonathan called me right in the middle of that. And he was like, hey, this church in Fort Wayne just emailed me. They want us to move to the next process. And I was kind of embarrassed before God, like, why can't I trust you? You know, because it was right in that moment. And I feel like God was kind of putting me in my place a little bit, which is something I see that he did for Job too. When even though Job was faithful, God still had to give him some perspective. And I think that when you're in those really hard seasons, you need a good, healthy dose of perspective. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now in our lives of, you know, being in a new place, in a new situation, and just saying, okay, God, like, what's the next year going to look like? And how is this all going to go? And trying to process everything through the lens of faith is really hard when there's pain involved and grief involved and all of that.
Yeah, I think sometimes God just needs to kick our butt a little bit.
Like,
Definitely.
where were you when I made the world, you know? And I'm like,
Yeah, I find it so crazy. I think, though the project is on wisdom, I've seen and evaluated a lot of my faithfulness in the whole project, because I know for a fact that if I were to go through all that Job would go through, I wouldn't have that same perspective he did of, okay, yes, this is hitting me, this is hitting me, I'm going to do this. But I'm not going to speak unjustly against my God. I'll cling to my faithfulness, my righteousness, because he knew that in the midst of all that, God was working